Thank you, Rudy. A bit like the previous two speakers, it's a bit of a double act. I'll give some initial background to the Alliance contract that's been released today, and then Donna King from Yorkshire Water will talk about how they're adopting it. I think they're the first ones off the block to adopt the NEC Alliance contract. So in terms of the contract itself, it's been published today. Here it is, and it's all brown beigey glory, or as someone described it earlier, vintage gold, which sounds better. So let you describe for yourselves what you think that colour scheme is, but what's inside is important, that's the key thing. So, some of you may recall that I was at this conference last year talking about the consultative edition of the Alliance contract. Again, as Rudy's outlined, that was issued for consultation in July last year. We had a very good consultation period, a lot of people in industry feeding in their views and thoughts. We also targeted conversations with users of Alliance arrangements or those interested in Alliance arrangements. All of that feedback was gathered, reviewed, and then common themes picked up and brought into the final edition. So hopefully the final contract that's now available is going to be more suitable for users to use on their particular projects. If you have a consultative edition, you need to put that one to one side because the one we've got now is quite different, not radically so, but there are quite a lot of changes within the final version that's being released. So in terms of my part of the talk today, I'm going to talk about the NEC approach to alliancing, just very briefly, then look at when and why to use the Alliance contract, then look at some of the key aspects of the contract, and then close and hand over to Donna. So in terms of the NEC approach to alliancing, NEC has always been a collaborative form of contract, trying to create an alliance and a way of working between the parties that is in the common good. So in terms of the journey we've been on, we always had clause 10.2, mutual trust and cooperation. We have a suite of contracts that allows all members of the supply chain to be engaged on terms and conditions that feature that requirement, that start off with that underpinning behaviour and expectation. And then interestingly, just picking up what was talked about in Project 13, we then have X12 multi-party collaboration to form a softer alliance arrangement where that overlays individual by-party contracts, creates a core team, has shared partnering information and aligned objectives, so aligned targets to achieve as a group as opposed to individuals. But that only ever overlaid existing contracts that were still at their core by-party arrangements with a set risk allocation within them. So on the back of the feedback, we've produced the Alliance contract, a true multi-party contract, where all the key members of the supply chain and the client sign up to the same contract, work to the same terms and conditions, share in the same risk and rewards. So in terms of where the Alliance contract fits within the NEC suite, some of you may be familiar with this diagram. So this indicates how you have NEC contracts, how they cover from business case through design, implementation into operation, and then we have high and low complexity. And the Alliance contract sort of sits in the top third in the middle. It is a contract that is designed for complex contracts where you need to have the level of management techniques contained within the contract, and it's generally designed around design and implementation. There is an early Alliance involvement secondary option, so that could bring back the engagement of the Alliance to an earlier point, but generally it's a design and build contract. So, when and why to use the Alliance contract? Well, it's designed for use on major projects or programs of work where longer-term collaborative working arrangements are to be created. That may not necessarily be a single project, it is designed for programs of work. And again, when we hear about Yorkshire Water's approach, that sort of lends itself to this program approach, where you can create a major program by introducing a number of schemes into the contract to give it that sufficient value, complexity to require the use of the Alliance contract. And the view we have is that there's going to be time taken to create the Alliance, to put in place the management structures needed to make it work effectively. So you're only going to use this where you have that volume of work, where you have that need for that level of complexity and engagement. I've already mentioned it is a true Alliance contract, in that all members are engaged under a single set of terms and conditions, including the client. So this is not a joint venture arrangement where you've got a joint venture engaging with a client. This is a number of people coming together who are of equal standing. And one of the key things, and I'll talk about this later on, is the idea that every member of the Alliance is equal in the sense of they have equal voice and equal voting rights in how that Alliance functions and how it makes decisions. We don't have the client and the rest, we have the Alliance, which includes the client. And the key thing is that all members of the Alliance are incentivised to work together to have around a shared set of performance objectives, and all of them together will stand or fail based on how they achieve those objectives. So it's not about individual drivers, individual performance, it's about the collective performance of the alliance. So this is how you may structure a traditional design and construction arrangement. You've got the client engaging a contractor at the first tier, that contractor then engaging subcontractors, sub-consultants, etc., maybe some reserved members of the client team, project manager, supervisor, etc. So that's the traditional arrangement. The alliance, quite different. So in this model, we have all the various members of the alliance all signing up to that same contract. They form the alliance. And it'll be down to the client, probably in consultation with the alliance members, as in who they need to be at that sort of top table. Who are those key suppliers who should be actually members of the alliance itself. And then you may still get some subcontractors. You know, it's not envisaged that every single member of the supply chain would be part of the alliance contract with a couple of hundred people engaged as part of the alliance board. It is the key suppliers, but that's not going to be by value necessarily. It's going to be about how important they are to contributing to the overall success. And it could be that consultants, sub-consultants, and even the client may have their own sub-consultants or subcontractors. Again, the idea of equality in the alliance, that we're looking for these key members to engage any other necessary suppliers to form the alliance to deliver the work. In terms of the drafting style, as you would expect, it's an NEC contract, so it follows the NEC principles of contract drafting. It's consistent with all the other NEC contracts where possible. So same sort of terminology, same approaches, but obviously we do have quite a different thing within it, in that it is this multi-party collaborative arrangement. So we still have a drive for flexibility, to stimulate good project management, and to work for clarity and simplicity. So the key features are use of plain English, present tense, focus on risk and value management, are part of that contract, core to its drafting and its content, and also it is a performance-based arrangement. In terms of the options, there is a single main option, so equivalent to the option E. Again, similar to what Project 13 are recommending around how to engage the supply chain, but that is overlaid with a performance regime. And that performance regime comes in two parts, if you like. The first part is you set targets for alliance objectives. Those alliance objectives set by the client at the start, and then there's a performance table produced, which then indicates what performance levels need to be achieved, and what the rewards or reductions will be in payments to all members of the alliance if those targets are bettered or there's underperformance. So they could be things like time, they could be things like quality, those sorts of aspects. And then we also have a financial incentive, again determined through the performance table, but here we're comparing budget to total alliance cost. So similar to a option C, D, pain share, gain share arrangement under an ECC. But the key differential here is the budget and the alliance costs also include the client's costs. The client is a member of that alliance. Their costs also form part of what we're going to incentivise and judge performance against. Again, this idea of everybody working together for the common good. If the alliance can maybe reduce land take, reduce land compensation payments, that reduces costs to the client. That's a saving created for the alliance. Everybody shares in that success. So trying to bring everybody together with these same objectives. In terms of secondary options, there's a limited number of secondary options available. That's partly because quite a few have been brought into the core clauses. So for example, X15, contractors design, that's in core clauses. X12, multi-party collaboration, that forms part of the core of this contract. Secondary options that remain available for selection, X2, changes in the law, X4, performance guarantee, and that'll be by partner. And there's a choice there as to whether you ask the partner to give a ultimate holding company guarantee or a performance bond or neither, depending on their status. Do they have a parent company? Do you have any concerns about any financial stability issues? Though in fairness, as I'll talk later, this contract has limited risk on the supply chain. Most risks are shared by the alliance. So whether you need some of these secondary options, I think will be a matter of debate. There's the option for X9 transfer of rights to be included, should a client wish to own the IPR of what the alliance produces. We then have X10, information modelling. And that's slightly different to how information modelling is dealt with in the ECC, the PSC, etc. Because the idea here is it's the alliance who will create the model, client being part of that alliance, and will hand it back to the client at the end of the contract. X18 limitation of liability, again, applies per partner, but again, given what I'm going to talk about liabilities and risks, whether that will be used will be interesting to see. We have X22, early alliance involvement, and then also we have a new secondary option introduced for the alliance contract, X26, program of work. So this is where we can try and use the contract to cover not just a single major project, but also use it on a program basis. And the idea is that the alliance can add, well, the client can add work into the alliance through X26, with the alliance board then reviewing and deciding whether to go ahead with that work. We then have the usual UK options available. Project bank account was in the core in the consultative edition. It's now an option. We cover off the payment requirements around the Housing Grants Construction and Regeneration Act. In terms of dispute resolution, I'll talk about that later because it's quite different under this contract. And then we have the option for Z clauses. And as you heard earlier, less Z clauses the better. Question marks around how they should be used. Though we all expect that there is going to be some level of boilerplating that certain clients may need to include for specific things. And the option is available in this contract as the other contracts in the NEC suite. In terms of the structure of the alliance, this slide just tries to show how the alliance fits together. And the first thing it tries to demonstrate is the client has two roles, if you like. So the client has a role outside of the alliance and as part of the alliance. So first of all, the client will initially help create the alliance, select the partners who are going to work with them. They will set out maybe some initial scope, including a specific aspect called client's requirements. And they'll create the performance table, determine what's important to them, what the alliance objectives are, what the performance regime will be. And then once the alliance is up and running, they have a further sort of reserved function around carrying out assurance on cost and quality as required in the scope. I mean, the alliance is self-governing, if you like, but the client, we expect, will want to have some sort of governance function to do some checks, some audits, but the level and extent of that will be determined by a client on a contract-by-contract basis. We then have the alliance structure itself. So we have an alliance board, and that is the key decision-making body within the contract. So the alliance board is similar to almost like a board of directors. Every member of the alliance has a member on that board, each with equal voting rights, one vote each. And the idea is that alliance board is there to set the strategy for the alliance, determine at the high level the initial allocation of work, and then they appoint the alliance manager who will actually manage the alliance day to day. And another key aspect of the alliance board's role is to resolve disputes. So if there's any problems in the alliance, if there are any disputes that occur, it's the alliance board who will resolve them. We then have the alliance manager appointed by the alliance board. Could come from a partner organisation, the client's organisation. There's no set person who has to take this role. It's somebody with the knowledge and skills to operate the contract. The alliance manager manages the contract day to day. So they're the person who is on the ground managing the contract, and they work to deliver what the scope requires and also to achieve the objectives of the alliance board and the members of the alliance, and they obey the instructions from the alliance board and client. Below the alliance manager, we have the alliance delivery team, and that's the team that actually delivers the work. And that's not a defined term now, that's going to be created as and when required to suit the particular alliance, the work to be done. And then under the alliance delivery team, we have those delivering the work. So the partners and the clients working as part of that delivery team, doing what is necessary to provide the works. In terms of key aspects, looking at behavioural aspects first, one big thing I've already mentioned, the nature of this contract requires unanimous decision making for the vast majority of actions under the contract. This is a truly collaborative arrangement. It's not a master and servant where the client can dictate and say yes or no. Most decisions have to be by unanimous agreement of all members of that alliance board. However, there are a couple of client reserved matters. So what we have is the ability for the client to change unilaterally something we're calling the client's requirements. And that's like a subset of the scope, and that's that element of the scope that the client is going to reserve the power to change unilaterally. And by having that stated at the start, it gives you the members of the alliance an understanding and knowledge of what can or can't be changed without their consent. Other changes to the scope outside of the client's requirements has to be by mutual agreement. and the client also reserves the power to stop or not start any work. In terms of the alliance members, what their role and functions around behavioural aspects, they have to collaborate to achieve the alliance objectives and the objectives of each partner, as stated in their contract data. They work collectively to support delivery of the contract and establish an integrated alliance delivery team on a best for project basis. And again, that's a key tenet of this contract. It's not individual companies being driven by their own turnover, wanting to grab more work for themselves. This model is working on the basis that actually, if another contractor can do the work cheaper than contractor A or more cost effectively, then they should do it. The other contractor should be happy, because if savings are made, they'll get a share in those savings. So it's all for the collective good, not individual drivers. There's other key aspects. Alliance manager, this is probably the most important role under the contract, similar in many ways to the project manager under the ECC, but actually slightly broader because it goes into some contractor functions, because we don't have that, that split between contractor and client. It's the alliance. So the alliance manager manages the early warning process, looks after quality management and defects, so takes on supervisor functions in that sense. Also, the alliance manager assesses the amount due to the members of the alliance and applies for payments which the client then pays. So the client has no direct role in the payment process other than writing the checks. However, the client has the ability to audit and inform the alliance manager of any errors in that payment, if there are any. We've also introduced into the alliance contract something new called the implementation plan. The view being that these alliances could be complex, involving multiple parties, and we need to have a set of rules or governance over how, at a day-to-day level, they will operate and work. So this idea of this implementation plan, this will describe the management structure for the alliance, roles and responsibilities, any delegation, etc. And the idea this will be created at the start when the alliance is formed, and it may be at quite a high level, quite basic at that stage, and it can change, develop and grow during the life of the alliance, but any changes to that must be determined by the alliance board. And it's for the alliance and the alliance manager to work to that governance document. We still have programs in the alliance contract, and those programs are very similar to programs in the ECC, so contain a lot of the same content, but what we don't have is issue and acceptance. Because the alliance is a single team, we don't have a client and a contractor, we have a single alliance team, and the alliance manager creates and issues the program, and we have an issued program. And then the alliance members contribute to producing that program and then work to it once it's been issued. In terms of compensation events, there are very few compensation events in this contract. There's 8 in the standard contract, one of which is any additional ones in the contract data, so only really 7 to start off with. And the reasons why there's so few is because there's so few client reserved matters for which the client has to make a decision or has to give, change to client requirements, access to the site, etc. So there's very little risk the client holds outside of the alliance. The same for the partners within the alliance. The alliance manager is the person who manages the compensation event process. They decide if an event notified is or is not a compensation event, and they put the quotation together with the support of the members of the alliance manager whose work's affected, and they issue that. So again, we don't have a formal issue and acceptance process. We don't have the client having a direct role in this process. It's the alliance manager, but any member of the alliance can, within a limited time frame, raise a complaint or raise an error that they believe has been incurred in producing that quotation, and then that will go to the alliance board, who will resolve that challenge to the quotation as issued. So again, very much the alliance manager on behalf of the alliance working the process. In terms of risks, most standard contracts allocate risk between the parties. So on day one, each party then knows their risk and tries to fight their position, avoid their risks occurring, pushing risk onto the other side. Talked a lot already today about the right transfer of risk, how transfer should be allocated in the supply chain. So what we do in the alliance contract is we share the vast majority of the risks. They become the risks of the alliance. And in terms of liabilities, the only liabilities that the client and partner has outside of the alliance is an intentional act or omission to not comply with the requirements of the contract. So in effect, a willful default type provision. So unless the client or the partners are in willful default, there's very little grounds of liability or claim between the parties. In addition, we have a breach of IPR and death or bodily injury to own employees. All the rest of the risks are shared by the alliance. In terms of dispute resolution, in keeping with the consultative edition, we've still gone down the route of not having any form of adjudication within the contract. So first thing we have is a no blame, no claim clause in the contract, similar to what you'd find in a joint venture agreement that says the members of the alliance agree they will not raise any dispute, any claim against another member, except for, in the case of a willful default, breach of IPR, those limited circumstances. So that at day one, agreeing they can't sue each other if things go wrong, they're going to share that risk. If there is a dispute, that goes for resolution by the Alliance Board. And the Alliance Board has two options in how to try and resolve it. It's for the Alliance Board to make the decision, but what they can do is they can appoint an independent expert to provide a non-binding opinion, if that will help try and get the matter resolved. Or they can appoint the senior representatives of those members of the alliance who are in dispute to negotiate and try and come up with a settlement agreement between them, and they can appoint a mediator to assist in that process if it will be of benefit. Where you have YUK2 applying, that secondary option selected, then there is a right to adjudicate at any time, but there are no adjudication rules in the contract. So if you were to launch an adjudication, you'd be under the scheme for construction contracts in the UK, that would apply. The idea being that we don't want to push people down that route. We have some alternative options in the contract, but we cannot unfortunately exclude that right under law to adjudicate at any time. In fairness though, there is, if you like, a way out in the alliance. If there is one party who defaults, one party does not perform with their obligations, that you can terminate a partner or the client could be terminated for cause. So this is the only part of the contract where you can have a unanimous decision. So if one party or one partner is in breach, the rest of the Alliance Board could vote that person out, that company out. But it needs every other member of the Alliance Board, apart from the person being terminated, to vote for that. And conversely, if the client's in breach, all members of the alliance, apart from the client, could vote to bring the alliance to an end. But that's only in cases of breach of contract. This is not in cases where the parties fall out, they're not happy. If they, there are opportunities for mutual removal of a partner or mutually bringing the alliance together, but this process is only around termination for fault. In terms of, In terms of user guides and help from the NEC, as you would expect, there are updated user guides to incorporate the alliance contract. So volumes 1 and volume 3 have been updated to incorporate the alliance contract, touching on some of the behavioural aspects in selection, some of the new choices you have in terms of contract selection. And we have a volume 2 and volume 4, how to prepare an alliance contract and how to manage an alliance contract. And as with all NEC4 contracts, flowcharts are available, but electronic only. Okay, I was talking with somebody earlier who was saying they didn't realise that the flowcharts were still in place for NEC4. They're available, but they're online only. They're not in the published box set. And then in terms of further support, the NEC recognises this contract is quite different to what's already out there, different to other NEC contracts. So we have an early adopter programme where the NEC is providing support. You can get an NEC consultant to work with you should you choose to adopt this contract, and they help you look at how, understand the contents of it, the concepts of it, and how it should operate. And also training will be being released fairly shortly, both online and classroom based, around how to use the alliance contract. Okay, that's it from me. I will hand over to Donna Kingett from Yorkshire Water Services, who will talk around Yorkshire Water's reasons and rationale for adopting the alliance contract.